Okay, welcome to QuadPAC tutorial number 14. This one's going to be shorter than the last one. All right, cross multiplying would be helpful here. So we know how to cross multiply. We've done that a lot with linear equations, and we're going to remember to put parentheses around anything that has more than one term, whether in the denominator or the numerator. So we're going to cross multiply. We'll have 3x times x plus 4 equals, we have to remember to put an equal to separate the two things that we're multiplying. Negative 9 times 4 is negative 36. We'll go ahead and distribute, so we'll have 3x squared plus 12x equals negative 36. And then we'll get everybody over to the same side. All right, ready to know a secret? Here's the deal. We cross multiplied, so that's not new. We're looking at this, and honestly, we don't know if we could even factor it. So the first thing I'm going to notice before I do the quadratic formula, because that's the unit we're on, or that's the part of the unit we're on, I see a 3, a 12, and a negative 36. Even if you're using the quadratic formula, you can still factor out the GCF. So that's what we're going to do. What number goes into 3, 12, and 36? That's right, 3. So we're going to factor out a 3, and we'll just say that leaves us with x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. Okay, I know we're supposed to be doing the quadratic formula, right? We're in the quadratic formula thing, but can we think of two numbers that multiply to give you a negative 12 and add to give you a 4? Yes, so I'm going to tell you something. If you're clever enough on the test to notice that you can use a different method than the quadratic formula, use it. That tells me that you're showing more learning than if you just said, I'm doing quadratic formula no matter what. I'm doing quadratic formula no matter what. So we're looking here, and we could use a quadratic formula. If we did, the 3 becomes nothing, because if we divided both sides by 3, so that's another way to look at it. If we divided both sides by 3, bam, that's gone. So if you didn't notice that you could factor here, you could go ahead and use quadratic formula, right? A would equal 1, B would equal 4, C would equal negative 12, and you're going to get the same answer as we will if we factor. All right, two numbers that multiply to equal negative 12 but add to equal 4. That's right, plus 6 and minus 2. If you want to have some fun, and quotation marks around fun, you could go ahead and do the quadratic formula and see if you get the same answers as we are. X equals negative 6 and x equals 2. By the way, you would, if you have the extra time, go ahead and use quadratic formula. So we could have used quadratic formula, but we're going to show our brilliance by noticing when we can get out of using quadratic formula and use either square root method or factoring. All right, what can we do here before we use quad form, and do we even need to use the quad form? So very similar problem, right? We're going to go ahead. We see that we can factor out the GCF. What's the biggest number that goes into both 5 and 35? That's right, 5. So when we factor it out, we're left with this. Once again, let's say you're taking the test and it's the using the quad formula section, and you're just nervous. If you're not thinking, hey, I could factor the left side and not use quadratic formula, that's okay if you're not thinking that way. You could still use quad formula, right? You could say A equals 1, B equals 7, C equals 0, and you can plug it into the quadratic formula. You already know how to do that. We've practiced a lot with that. Or you could go, wait a minute, what's the GCF? The biggest, not a number, it's not going to be a number, but the biggest variable, the biggest x that can come out is an x, which leaves me with x plus 7. And then we get to go ahead and use our multiplicative property of 0 that says when something times something equals 0, that either one of the factors will equal 0. And we will get x equals 0 or x equals negative 7. So I know this was about using the quad formula. And you know what? Since it is, oops, I'm stepping on my mic. Since it is, we could go ahead and use the quad formula real quick. X, I know because you love to hear me sing this. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, let's see if it's true. We're going to get negative 7 plus or minus. When we put this into the calculator, because that's a 0, we will get 7. And so just a warning, when we get something like this, you know how sometimes I'd say, yeah, let's stop, and this is our answer because we'd have a root in it, a square root. Well, we don't have a square root here. There's no stopping. So we're going to separate, and it's either negative 7 plus 7 divided by 2 as our answer, or negative 7 minus 7 divided by 2. So let's look what we get. We get either x is equal to 0 when we put that into the calculator, or x is equal to negative 7. Oh, shocking, right? Both methods give us the same answer. Whether we're going to factor out the GCF or whether we're going to use quad form, the answers are the same. I love math. It's so cool. All right. What happens here? All right, can I go ahead and factor here? Can I think of two numbers that multiply together to equal 16 and also add to equal negative 8? I can, and I'm going to factor. Once again, if you want me to do quadratic formula, I can stop and do that. We'll do that actually because I do want you to see it both ways. Because, right, wonder if you're feeling nervous and you just turn to the quadratic formula because that's what the test says to do. So I want you to see it both ways. But here, negative 4 times negative 4 does equal 16, and negative 4 plus negative 4 equals negative 8. So this is one of those ones where I set them up, and both of my answers are 4, which means, right, I don't write my answer twice. X equals 4, which is strange, right? That's just one answer. Let's stop real quickly and do the quadratic formula so you can see you also just get one answer. A equals 1, B equals negative 8, C equals 16, X equals negative B. Oops, B is already negative, so negative negative 8 is 8, plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2, I almost wrote A. All right, so let's go ahead and put this into, put this into our calculator. I think it's going to give us a surprise. I believe it's going to give us a 0, but let me just double check. Yep, it's going to give us a 0. We've never had that before. So when it gives us a 0, that means we've got x equals 8 plus or minus 0 over 2. All right, 8 plus or minus 0. Okay, let's see. 8 plus 0 is 8. 8 minus 0 is 8. So basically, x is equal to 4. So the same answer, right? And that's odd. When we get just one answer, whether we use factoring or the quadratic formula, it's because if we took the time to get on Desmos and graph y equals x squared minus 8x plus 16, this is what we would see. We would see a quadratic that touches the x-axis in exactly one place at x equals 4. And that's why our answer is just 4. So I'm hoping that, oops, stop. Once again, I would have liked to start with graphing first, but we're doing it this way, and that's okay, because when we finally get to graphing quadratics, you're going to be like, oh, that's what that meant when we were factoring. We actually, when we're factoring and doing the square root and doing quadratic formula, we are actually using something that's going to help us to understand what's going on in the graph. All right, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next tutorial.